Some nights are remembered for the ring, some nights are remembered for the toast, but this night, this one particular night in a quiet mountain town in North Carolina, would be remembered for the secret that walked through the front door in a gray wool coat, holding an envelope that nobody expected to see again. If you have ever loved someone twice in one lifetime, if you have ever believed that some doors close forever only to discover they were only ever closed for a season, then stay with me tonight, because what happened at Cedar Hollow Farm outside Boone, North Carolina, was not just an engagement party. It was a reckoning 40 years in the making. Before we begin, welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, we tell true-to-life, character-driven stories about love, family, second chances, and the quiet dramas that unfold behind closed doors in ordinary American homes. If stories like this speak to you, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Tap the bell so you never miss the next one, and if you're driving, cooking, or just relaxing tonight, settle in, because this story runs long and it runs deep. Let's begin. Denise Ashford was 54 years old the spring she got engaged for the second time in her life. She lived in a modest two-story home on Willow Bend Road just outside Boone, the kind of house with a wraparound porch and a garden she had rebuilt with her own two hands after her husband Thomas passed away 6 years earlier from a heart condition nobody saw coming. Thomas had been the love of her young adulthood, the father of her only daughter Nancy, and for a long time after he died, Denise believed that chapter of her life, the chapter marked love, had quietly closed. She was wrong. Russell Whitmore came into her life the way most important things do, without any fanfare at all. He was 58, a retired contractor who had spent 30 years building homes across the Blue Ridge foothills, and he had lost his own wife, Carol, to cancer 4 years before he ever laid eyes on Denise. They met at a grief support group that neither of them wanted to attend, in the basement of a Methodist church on Tuesday evenings, surrounded by folding chairs and lukewarm coffee. Denise had almost not gone that night. Russell had almost left early. Neither of them ever forgot that if either decision had gone differently, they might never have met at all. For 2 years, they built something slow and careful. They did not rush. They had both been burned by loss in ways that made caution feel like wisdom rather than fear. They took long drives along the Blue Ridge Parkway. They cooked Sunday dinners together. They introduced their grown children to one another gently, over many months, watching carefully to see if old wounds would heal or reopen. And on a Friday evening in early April, on the same porch where Denise had once sat alone with her grief, Russell got down on one knee and asked her to marry him. She said yes before he even finished the sentence. They decided to hold their engagement celebration at Cedar Hollow Farm, a restored farmhouse just outside Boone that hosted weddings and private events beneath a canopy of 200-year-old oak trees. It was Denise's idea. She wanted something that felt like new beginnings, but honored the weight of what they had both already lived through. Russell agreed immediately. He would have agreed to almost anything that made her smile the way she smiled when she talked about that place. The guest list grew larger than either of them expected. Denise's daughter Nancy, now 29 and living in Charlotte, flew in with her husband. Russell's 2 adult children, his son Gerald and his daughter Susan, both still living in the Boone area, said they would be there, though Gerald's tone on the phone had been colder than Russell wanted to admit out loud. Denise's younger sister Patricia drove up from Nashville, Tennessee with her husband. Old friends from the church group came. Neighbors came. It was, by every outward measure, the beginning of something joyful. But joy, as anyone who has lived long enough will tell you, rarely arrives without complication trailing quietly behind it. The evening began exactly as it should have. String lights had been hung between the oak trees, casting a soft amber glow over long wooden tables set with white linen and mason jars filled with wildflowers. A local trio played acoustic guitar near the veranda. The smell of hickory-smoked barbecue and cornbread drifted from the catering tent, and laughter rose easily from every corner of the yard. Denise wore a soft blue dress that Nancy had helped her pick out, and Russell wore a simple gray suit jacket over a white shirt, no tie, exactly the way Denise liked him best. For the first hour, everything was perfect. Toasts were given. Nancy stood and spoke about how her mother had taught her that love does not disappear when someone dies. It simply waits for the right moment to return in a new form. Patricia made everyone laugh with a story about Denise's terrible cooking back when they were teenagers in Lexington. Russell's daughter Susan hugged Denise tightly and whispered that she was happy her father had found his way back to laughing again. But Gerald, Russell's oldest son, stood near the back of the tent through most of it, arms crossed, a half-finished glass of sweet tea in his hand, watching the celebration with an expression that Denise noticed but chose not to mention. She had learned, in her years of loving carefully, not to force conversations that people were not ready to have. It was just after 8 o'clock, as the sun dropped low behind the ridgeline and the string lights began to do the real work of lighting the yard, that the gravel driveway crunched under the weight of a car nobody recognized. A woman stepped out. She was in her 60s, silver-haired, dressed simply, and she carried a manila envelope pressed against her chest, like it might blow away in the wind. She did not walk toward the party with confidence. She walked like someone approaching a door she had been standing outside of for a very long time, uncertain whether she still had the right to knock. Her name was Judith Calloway, and she had been Carol Whitmore's closest friend for over 30 years. Russell saw her first. His face changed in a way Denise had never seen before, something between recognition and dread. He excused himself from the group he was speaking with and walked toward her, and Denise, sensing the shift in the air the way you sense a storm before the first drop of rain, followed a few steps behind. "Judith," Russell said, his voice low. "I didn't expect you. I know," she said. "I almost didn't come. I've been sitting in my car in the parking lot down the road for 45 minutes trying to talk myself out of it." She glanced past him toward the tent, toward the lights and the laughter, and Denise standing just behind his shoulder. "But I made a promise to Carol before she passed, and I have carried it for 4 years, and I could not let tonight happen without keeping it." Russell's jaw tightened. "Judith, whatever this is, can it wait?" "No," she said gently. "It can't. It was never meant to wait this long in the first place." Denise stepped forward, her hand finding Russell's arm. "I'm Denise," she said. "Is everything all right?" Judith looked at her for a long moment, and something in her expression softened, as if she had expected to feel resentment toward this woman, and instead felt only sympathy. "You must be the one Carol used to talk about," she said quietly. Denise blinked. "I'm sorry?" Judith held up the envelope. Before Carol died, she wrote several letters, one for Susan, one for Gerald, one for Russell, which he already received. "And one," she said, her voice catching slightly, "for whoever Russell chose to love again, whenever that day came. She made me promise that if that day ever arrived, I would deliver it myself, in person, before any wedding took place. Not after, before. She was very specific about that." The music from the trio kept playing. Somewhere behind them, someone laughed loudly at a joke, and in the middle of it all, Russell stood frozen, staring at an envelope with his late wife's handwriting on the front, addressed simply, "To the woman my Russell loves next." Nancy noticed the tension first among the guests and quietly began steering people toward the dessert table, buying her mother a moment of privacy without making a scene, the way daughters who have watched their mothers survive hard things learn to do instinctively. Patricia moved to stand near Denise's other side, not speaking, just present, the way sisters do. Gerald, watching from across the yard, set down his glass and walked over, his expression unreadable. "What is this?" he said, not really a question. "Your mother's letter," Judith said simply. "For Denise." Gerald's face hardened. "You're telling me my mother wrote a letter for whoever Dad remarried, and you're delivering it now, at his engagement party, in front of everyone?" "I'm delivering it now," Judith said steadily, "because that's what she asked me to do, and because I loved your mother enough to keep a promise even when it's uncomfortable. What's inside that envelope isn't a scandal, Gerald. It isn't a trick. It's a mother's love letter to whoever came after her, and I think, if you give it a chance, you'll understand that better than you think." Denise looked at Russell. His eyes were wet, his throat working as he tried to find words. "I didn't know she wrote a fourth letter," he said quietly. "I only knew about the 3. She didn't want you to know," Judith said. "She wanted it to come as a surprise, at the right time, from someone she trusted. She used to say that love isn't something you lose when you die, it's something you pass forward. She wanted whoever loved you next to know that she wasn't a ghost, standing between you. She was a bridge. The yard had gone quiet by now, guests sensing that something significant was unfolding, though most did not yet understand what. Denise took the envelope with trembling hands. She looked at Russell, silently asking permission, though this letter was addressed to her. "Read it," Russell said softly. "Please. I want to hear it too." Denise opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, written in careful, looping handwriting that had clearly been produced with great effort by someone who was very sick at the time. She began to read aloud, her voice unsteady but growing stronger with each line. "To whoever loves my Russell next. If you are reading this, it means the thing I hoped for actually happened. That after grieving me the way I know he grieves, deeply and quietly and for far too long, he found someone who made him want to keep living instead of merely surviving. I do not know your name, I do not know your face, but I know this. If Russell chose you, it is because you are patient with his silences, because you understand that a man who has loved once deeply does not love carelessly the second time, and because somewhere in you, you carry the same kind of steady, unglamorous devotion that I tried to give him for 31 years. I am not asking you to replace me. I am asking you to finish what I could not. Take care of the parts of him that are still healing. Laugh at his terrible jokes about lumber and property lines. Remind him that it is all right to be happy again, because grief has a way of convincing good men that joy is a betrayal, and it is not. Loving again is not betrayal. It is proof that the love was real in the first place. Welcome to the family, whoever you are. I hope you dance at your wedding. I hope Gerald warms up to you eventually. He is stubborn like his father. And I hope, more than anything, that you love him exactly as fiercely as I did, because he deserves nothing less. With more gratitude than I can put into words, Carol." By the time Denise finished reading, there was not a dry eye within 20 feet of where she stood. Nancy was openly crying, holding her husband's hand. Patricia had both hands pressed to her mouth. Susan had crossed the yard at some point during the reading, and now stood beside her father with tears streaming down her face, gripping his hand. But it was Gerald who moved first. He walked forward, took the letter gently from Denise's hands, and read it again silently, his lips moving slightly over certain lines, the way people do when they need to hear their mother's voice one more time through her own handwriting. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully and looked up at Denise, his eyes red. "I've been cold to you for 2 years," he said, his voice rough, "not because of anything you did, because loving you felt like admitting she was really gone, and I wasn't ready to admit that. I'm sorry. My mother just gave me permission I didn't know I needed." Denise, who had spent 2 years quietly absorbing Gerald's distance without complaint, without pressure, without ever once asking Russell to intervene, felt something in her chest release that she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She reached out and hugged him, and after a stiff moment of hesitation, he hugged her back. Judith stood off to the side, watching, her own eyes wet. "I'm sorry for the timing," she said to Russell. "I know it wasn't what you expected tonight." Russell shook his head, pulling her into an embrace. "It was exactly what tonight needed," he said. "Thank you for keeping your promise." The party did not end there, though. If anything, it deepened. The band began playing again, softer now, and Russell pulled Denise into the center of the string lights and asked her to dance, right there in the grass, in front of everyone. No music cue needed. No formal first dance planned for another few months at the actual wedding. He just needed to hold her. As they danced, he leaned down and whispered, "Carol always said, if I ever got the chance to love again, I shouldn't waste a single day being afraid of it. I think that letter was her last gift to both of us." Denise rested her head against his shoulder. "I think she just gave us her blessing and gave your children permission to give theirs too." Later that night, after most of the guests had gone home and only family remained, sitting around the fire pit near the veranda, with blankets over their laps and the last of the wine being poured, Gerald spoke up again. "I want to say something," he said, and the group quieted. "For the last 2 years, I told myself I was protecting my mother's memory by keeping Denise at arm's length. But watching that letter tonight, I realized I had it backward. My mother wasn't asking to be protected. She was asking to be honored by making sure my father was loved well after she was gone. Denise, I owe you an apology, And I owe you a real welcome to this family, not just a polite one." Denise wiped her eyes again, this exhausting, beautiful night having wrung more emotion out of her than she thought she had left to give. "You don't owe me anything, Gerald. Grief doesn't move on anyone else's schedule. I understand better than most people how long it can take to be ready." Nancy, sitting beside her mother, squeezed her hand. "Mom's right. Dad's been gone 6 years, and there are still days it hits me out of nowhere. Grief isn't linear. Nobody in this family needs to apologize for how long healing takes." Patricia raised her wine glass. "To Carol," she said, "for loving this family enough to write that letter, and to Thomas, for teaching Denise how to love this deeply in the first place. Neither of them are here tonight, but I don't think either of them ever really left." They drank to that in silence, the fire crackling, the mountain air turning cool, the string lights swaying gently overhead. Russell stood, walked around the fire, and knelt in front of Denise once more, this time not to propose, since that had already happened weeks earlier, but to say something he had clearly been holding on to all evening. "I loved Carol for 31 years, he said, his voice steady now, no longer catching. "That love doesn't get smaller because I love you too. I used to think my heart only had room for one great love in a lifetime. Tonight, I understand it was never about room. It was about the heart's capacity to keep growing, even after it's been broken. You didn't replace anything, Denise. You expanded everything." Denise, who had come into this relationship guarding herself carefully against exactly this kind of vulnerability, found she had no guard left standing. "I feel the same way about Thomas," she said. "I thought loving you would feel like betrayal. Instead, it feels like the most natural continuation of a life I thought had ended when he did." By midnight, the fire had burned low. The guests had truly gone, and only the immediate family remained, sitting together in a circle that had not existed with this much warmth just 12 hours earlier. Gerald sat beside Susan, both of them looking at photographs on Susan's phone from years back, showing their mother laughing at some long-forgotten family barbecue. Nancy sat with her husband, occasionally glancing at her mother with the quiet satisfaction of a daughter who has spent years hoping her mother would find happiness again and finally watched it happen in real time. Patricia had fallen half asleep in her chair, her husband's arm around her shoulders. And Denise and Russell sat together, hand in hand, watching the last embers glow, both of them thinking, without needing to say it aloud, about the strange, complicated, beautiful mechanics of second chances, about how love does not erase what came before it, about how the people we lose do not vanish from our stories, they simply become part of the foundation that new love is built on top of. That, in the end, is what really happens on the long-awaited night of an engagement, the night that everyone assumes is simply about rings and toasts and champagne. Beneath the surface celebration, something far more important is usually happening. Old wounds are being tested. Old loyalties are being renegotiated. Grief and joy are learning, awkwardly and imperfectly, to sit at the same table. Families that have been quietly guarded are finding their way back to open arms. And two people who have already survived the worst kind of loss are discovering that they are brave enough to risk loving again, fully, without holding anything back out of fear. If there is one thing this story asks you to carry with you tonight, it is this. If you are someone who has loved and lost, and you find yourself hesitant to open your heart again because it feels disloyal to the love you had before, please hear this clearly. Loving again is not a betrayal of what came before. It is proof that what came before was real enough to teach you how to love well in the first place. The people we lose would rarely want us to spend the rest of our lives standing still in our grief. Most of them, like Carol in this story, would want exactly what she wrote in that letter, for us to keep living, keep laughing, keep dancing under string lights in someone's backyard, keep choosing joy even when joy feels complicated. And if you are someone whose parent, sibling, or close family member has remarried after loss, and you have found yourself, like Gerald, holding on to distance out of some misplaced sense of loyalty to the person who passed, consider this your gentle nudge tonight to reconsider. Protecting a memory and welcoming new love are not opposites. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone you lost is to make room in your heart for whoever helped the person they loved learn to smile again. Family is rarely simple. Love, Especially love that arrives for the second time in a life already marked by loss is rarely simple either. But as Denise and Russell discovered on that porch, in that yard, beneath those oak trees, sometimes the most complicated nights turn out to be the ones that heal the most, if we are brave enough to stay present for all of it, the tears and the dancing both. If this story moved you tonight, if it reminded you of your own second chance, or your own complicated family, or someone you lost who you still find yourself talking to in quiet moments, we would love to hear about it in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from tonight, and tell us if you have ever experienced a moment like the one Denise and Russell shared, a moment when the past and the present found a way to sit peacefully at the same table. And if you enjoyed this story, please take just a moment to like this video. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling stories like this one. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story, because we have many more waiting for you. Stories about love found late in life, families healing after years apart, and the quiet, powerful moments that happen behind closed doors in ordinary homes across this country. Thank you for spending this time with us tonight. Take care of yourselves, hold your loved ones a little closer, and we will see you in the next story.
Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and support me. Thank you so much. I love you all. Bye!